Hello, sleepy dreamer. How you doing? Tonight I'll be your guide, here to ease you into calm, restful sleep. Before we get started, remember to like the video and subscribe so you won't miss future scary bedtime stories. Share in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. Also, let me know if there's a story you'd love to hear next. I used to sleep through most of the daytime, not out of laziness or sadness, but because I worked overnight shifts. 12 hours straight as a security guard in a business park on the outskirts of Maryland. The job was dull, mostly monitoring surveillance feeds and doing rounds every couple of hours, but it paid decently and kept me going. In that kind of routine, your phone becomes everything, your wake-up call, your planner, your tether to the outside world. So the day I woke up and saw over a dozen missed calls and a flood of messages from my landlord, my gut twisted. Call me. Urgent. Water leak below. Had to cut your water. I groaned, dragged myself out of bed and rang him back. He didn't bother softening the blow. Turns out the ceiling in the apartment beneath mine was leaking, and all signs led back to my bathroom. Since I hadn't picked up my phone all day, they'd shut off my water hours ago. That meant no shower, no coffee, no flushing the toilet. I asked if someone was coming to fix it, and he just said, "Your unit, your problem. Send me the receipt and I'll pay you back." I hung up, half asleep and already annoyed, and began dialing every plumber I could find online. Recommendations from Facebook groups, local listings, emergency contacts. Most were booked solid, didn't answer, or wanted outrageous fees for urgent calls. Just when I was ready to give up, I messaged my friend Andrea. She said I could crash at her place if needed, and then suggested, why not try Craigslist? Some guys on there do quick jobs. I rolled my eyes. Craigslist always felt sketchy to me, like the digital version of a dark alley, but I was running out of options. I pulled up the household services section and found this one ad. 38YO handyman. Fast, cheap, skilled. Plumbing, electrical, general repairs. Call or text. The post was basic. No business name, just a phone number. I hesitated, then shot him a message. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. The guy introduced himself as Mike. I told him what was going on, and to my surprise he said, "No problem. I can swing by in about an hour. Shouldn't take long." He sounded upbeat, almost cheerful. Said it probably was just a loose fitting or cracked pipe under the flooring. I didn't know any better, so I trusted him. Sure enough, an hour later he texted here. I realized I never gave him my unit number, so I buzzed him in and waited at my front door. When I opened it, he looked totally normal. Jeans, navy hoodie, a tool bag over one shoulder, close-cropped hair, some scruff on his jaw. Didn't smile much, but didn't set off any alarm bells either. I told him the bathroom was down the hall, and he gave a small nod before walking in without hesitation. I wandered back to the kitchen too tired to be polite, and poured myself some orange juice, hoping the sugar might jolt me awake a bit. A moment later he called out, "Hey, come check this out. Something looks weird." I shuffled toward the bathroom and leaned on the doorframe. That's the last crystal clear memory I have. The next thing I knew, I was surrounded by white light and muffled voices. A woman's voice kept repeating my name. "Stay with us, Thomas. You're okay. Don't move." I blinked hard as a flashlight beamed straight into my face. A paramedic was examining me. My head was pounding. My mouth felt like sandpaper. I tried to lift myself, but hands gently pushed me down. "Head trauma. Stay still. We're taking you in." My heart started racing. I turned my head and saw Andrea nearby, crying. She'd come by to check on me after I didn't respond to her messages, and thank God she had a spare key. "He's okay, right?" she asked, her face pale and terrified. "He's going to be okay." I saw the panic in her expression, and something inside me cracked. I began to shake. They loaded me onto the stretcher. One EMT said something about a possible concussion and how I was lucky. If Andrea hadn't come when she did, I might have slowly bled out. At the hospital, they ran tests, kept me conscious, and had me recount what I could remember, not that it was much. The full picture didn't come until a detective visited my room. My TV? Gone. Laptop? Gone. Cash, jewelry, anything worth money, vanished. My bedroom had been ransacked. Strangely, the bathroom was untouched. Not a single thing was out of place. "We've had a string of these," the detective said. "Craigslist handyman shows up, spins a story, knocks the victim out, cleans the place out. No prints. Always a new number. Could be the same guy, could be a copycat." I didn't have renter's insurance. I was left with a scar on my cheekbone from hitting the ground, but that wasn't the worst of it. The worst part came after. I didn't leave the apartment for weeks. Ignored every call. Let food rot in the fridge. Started sleeping with a kitchen knife beside the bed. Bought a door camera and spent hours just watching the screen. Even now, years later, I still freeze when someone knocks unexpectedly. I flinch at the sound of footsteps outside my door. Trust became a foreign concept. I couldn't date, couldn't let anyone in. Andrea tried her best to be there for me, but she eventually moved away for work. After that, I was completely on my own. The physical wounds mostly faded. I let my beard grow to hide the scar. But there are things you can't hide. The jolt of fear when a noise breaks the silence at night. The compulsion to double lock every door. The shame of having let the wrong person in. So yeah, Craigslist taught me something I'll never unlearn. The scar may have faded, but I still keep my distance. I still grow cold at the sound of an unexpected knock. I still check the peephole 5 times. Andrea meant well, she really did, but once she left, the solitude was absolute. The wound's still there, just deeper now. But last week, for the first time in years, I put the knife back in the drawer. Not because I feel safe, because I want to. And for now, that has to be enough. It all began with desperation. I was 28, living in a decaying 1-bedroom apartment above a record store in Chicago. The radiators hissed like angry animals, and the windows leaked icy drafts whenever the wind picked up. I'd lost my full-time job as a dispatcher after the company moved operations to Ohio. It wasn't personal, just numbers. For 4 months I got by on scraps, temp work, pet sitting, and selling junk online. I submitted over 100 job applications to grocery stores, office gigs, night stocking, but got nothing. Not even rejections, just silence. And when you're broke, that silence feels like proof you no longer matter. One August night, I sat at my chipped kitchen table, the only light coming from my laptop, desperately searching for fast money. I found a forum post by someone in Boston who swore by mystery shopping, said it was easy cash. The Craigslist link led to a Chicago listing, flexible hours, $35 to $50 per shop, no upfront cost. It seemed sketchy, but I was out of choices. I sent an email and quickly got a reply from someone named Daisy Parker using a Gmail address. She sounded professional, attached a basic-looking PDF, and asked for my contact info, PayPal, and availability. I filled it out and hit send. By morning, I had my first assignment: evaluate a worker at Sunrise Market, a grocery store I knew. The instructions were simple: go between 6 and 8 p.m., ask the employee in aisle 4 about canned tuna, complete a checklist, and don't reveal you're a secret shopper. Submit the report within 2 hours for payment. It felt doable. I'd worked retail in high school. We always whispered about mystery shoppers like they were myths. At 6:17, I entered Sunrise Market in a worn black hoodie, breathing like I was undercover. The store smelled of cleaning products and old fruit. I casually browsed until I found aisle 4. A skinny guy, maybe 24 or 25, with light brown hair and tired cheeks, was stocking cans. His vest read Dan. He stared blankly, not unlike how I used to look on late shifts. I hovered, then walked over. "Hey, sorry, can you help me find the canned tuna?" He didn't look up. Middle of the aisle, left side, he said flatly, gesturing vaguely. No greeting, no effort. I lingered, hoping he'd redeem the moment. He didn't. "Have a good night," I added. He glanced up, bloodshot eyes, and muttered, "You too," then just stared. I made a note of Dan in my phone and walked off. But as I moved through the next aisle, I felt it, that prickly, someone's behind you feeling. I turned. He was watching me from the edge. Every aisle I visited, he was nearby. Not working, just staring. By checkout, I was sweating. The cashier, Anne, passed with flying colors, smiled, made eye contact, cheerful goodbye. I nodded and left, hurried to my car, turned it on and typed my report before I forgot. Dan failed. No greeting, no eye contact, no help. As I typed, a shadow crossed my windshield. It was him, Dan, storming across the lot. He didn't look at my car directly, but walked past to a black sedan, got in and sped off with a screech. My heart pounded. I went home. The next day, $45 hit my PayPal, and a new assignment appeared. I moved on. 3 nights later, I was at my boyfriend Jeremy's place. We were on the couch, eating Chinese food, watching reruns. His dog Speed was asleep at our feet. Around 11:40 p.m., there was a loud knock. No, a slam, then another, and another. Jeremy paused the TV. We stared at each other. Speed growled. Jeremy walked to the window. I followed. Through the blinds, I saw Dan. Same hoodie, but worse. He looked exhausted, deranged, pacing the porch and muttering. Then he pounded the door again. I stepped back. Jeremy opened the storm window. "Hey man, you need to go." Dan didn't move. He slammed the door again and shouted, "I know what you did. You ruined everything." Jeremy whispered, "What is he talking about?" I couldn't answer. My mouth was dry. My heartbeat echoed in my arms. Dan shouted again, "I told you I was on my last chance, and you show up asking for fucking tuna like you're better than me." Jeremy stepped in front of me and grabbed his phone. I nodded. "Call the cops." Dan kept yelling, voice cracking, "You got me fired. You think you can just walk in, ruin my life and be safe? Eye for an eye." Then he began ramming his body against the door. The wood cracked. Speed barked like crazy. I clutched Jeremy's arm. He must have followed me that night. How else would he know? "Shoo," Jeremy whispered, phone to his ear. The dispatcher stayed on. In under 2 minutes, flashing lights lit up the walls. Dan ran, but a cop tackled him in the yard. We watched from the window, frozen. They cuffed him. Speed whined. An officer pulled a folding knife from his waistband. That's when I started trembling. Couldn't stop. Later, a detective told me more. Dan's real name was Daniel Miller. He'd worked at Sunrise nearly 2 years. Multiple write-ups. Already on probation from failing a previous secret shopper visit. That night, his girlfriend had left him. His car failed inspection, rent overdue. He wasn't having a bad day, he was breaking. My report cost him his job. That much was certain. But what I can't shake, how did he find me? I never used my real name. The email I gave was a throwaway. No link to my real identity. How did he know it was me? How did he get Jeremy's address? One theory, maybe he reviewed the store's cameras. Maybe he saw me leave, followed me, or noted my license plate and got someone to trace it. I don't know. What I do know is that I never mystery shopped again. Turned down every offer. I eventually got a steady job at a call center and tried to move on. Jeremy installed a camera outside. We moved a few months later, just in case. But even now in random stores, when I pass someone stocking shelves, I wonder, do they know? Are they watching? And is there a point where enforcing company rules becomes destroying someone's last sliver of hope? Because I crossed that line, and someone nearly died because of it. I never imagined that a used hockey net could endanger my son's life, but it did. And even though it's been over 2 decades since it happened, I still wake up some nights haunted by that truck stop, the glare of the lights and the sound of his scream. Let me rewind. It was 2002, and I lived in Brookville, Illinois, a peaceful suburb where folks left their doors unlocked and neighbors still dropped off casseroles. My wife Denise worked nights as a registered nurse, while I ran a small car flipping operation from our garage. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Our 11-year-old son, Richard, was completely obsessed with hockey, like most Midwest kids. He worshipped Jeremy Roenick and had a slapshot that once almost took down our backyard fence. We couldn't afford to put him in a travel league, but we tried everything we could to keep the dream going. He'd rig up goals using trash cans or sticks, but it just wasn't the same. That winter, he pleaded for a proper net. Not one of those toy-sized ones, but a full-scale regulation goal. We checked all the local shops, but even the used ones were way out of our budget. Then I remembered Craigslist. If you remember Craigslist back in the early 2000s, you know it was like a digital flea market. No flashy colors, no ads, just a basic ugly web page with listings. But if you were quick, you could score something great. I once got a snowblower for free off there. It still works. One night I stumbled on a listing. Regulation hockey goal. Gently used, $50. Includes puck and 2 sticks. Must pick up, call for info. No photo, just a short line and a phone number. I stared at it for a bit. My gut told me something wasn't quite right. But when you're a dad and your kid's eyes light up with hope, you ignore the warning signs. I dialed the number. After 3 rings, a man answered. "Hi, I'm calling about the hockey goal you listed." There was a pause, then, "Oh yeah, still got it. You want it?" His tone was flat and disinterested. Not creepy exactly, just blank, like he didn't care one way or the other. "Yeah, I do. My kid's been dreaming about one." Another pause. Then, "I'm up in Marlton, but I can meet you halfway. Has to be after work around 9. Marlton was a little over 2 hours north of Brookville. Meeting halfway would land us somewhere near the interstate, probably a gas station or rest stop. "I can do that," I said. "You'll bring the net?" "Yeah, I got a pickup. My buddy's bringing the sticks and puck. He'll follow me." That sentence gave me chills. The way he said it, it felt rehearsed. But again, I pushed the discomfort down. We agreed to meet at a rest stop off I-90, near a small town called Whitfield. I told Denise I'd be back in a couple hours. Richard begged to come. I said no at first, then gave in. He promised to stay in the van the whole time. I regret that decision to this day. The drive there was uneventful. Richard spent the ride talking nonstop about hockey, how he'd finally be able to practice for real now. It made me feel like I was doing something right as a dad. We arrived at the rest stop around 8:50. It was quiet. Just a few vending machines and rows of parking spots lit by dim yellow-orange floodlights, the kind that make everything look eerie. I pulled into the brightest lit area and looked at Richard. Stay in the van. If anything feels wrong, lock the doors. Got it? He nodded and gave a thumbs up. At exactly 9:06, a black pickup pulled up and stopped 10 feet in front of us. It looked old, but well cared for. The windows were tinted, and there was no front license plate. I stepped out slowly. The driver's window rolled down. Inside was a bald man, maybe early 40s, wearing mirrored sunglasses at night. "You Steve?" he asked. "Yeah," I answered. "My buddy's got the gear. He should be right behind me." I glanced at the bed of his truck. It was empty. No net. My stomach knotted. Why not bring it all in one vehicle? He shrugged. Wouldn't fit. Just then, 2 more pickups entered the lot. One parked behind mine. The other pulled into the space next to us. They were older models too. Same dark tint. No sign of any hockey gear. Something clicked. Not fear instinct. I turned back toward the van and shouted, "Richard, lock the doors now." He did. Immediately. Then the men began getting out. 6 total. Big guys. Some looked like they worked construction, others like gym rats. They didn't speak, just stared. The bald man stepped out of his truck, adjusting his jacket. He gave a nod to the guy in the truck behind mine, who started walking toward the van. My pulse thundered in my ears. "Wait," I said, panicked. "Here, take the money." I pulled out my wallet and handed over the $80 I had. The guy took it, flipped through the bills and frowned. "This all?" "That's it. That's all I brought," I said, barely able to breathe. "Please just take it and go." He gave a nod, and 2 of the men began moving fast toward the van. I bolted, screaming, telling them not to touch my son. One of them smashed the rear window with a tire iron. The sound of shattering glass merged with Richard's terrified screams. It destroyed me. Then red and blue flashes, a siren getting louder. A highway patrol cruiser tore into the lot, tires squealing. The officer inside took one look at the scene, activated the spotlight, and aimed it directly at the men. They scattered. 2 trucks sped away. The third got pinned between my van and the cruiser. The officer leapt out, gun drawn, barking orders. Backup arrived within 5 minutes. Richard was safe, shaking and sobbing but alive. The police interviewed us for almost an hour. I gave them every detail I could remember. Turns out the men in the truck that got stuck talked fast. They gave up everything. Names, addresses, even admitted this wasn't their first time. They'd been running this scam for a while, targeting dads who'd do anything for their kids. That night, officers escorted us home. My hands were trembling the whole way. Richard fell asleep, gripping my arm. I didn't tell Denise everything, just enough to explain the broken window and why our son couldn't stop crying. A few weeks later, the detectives informed me they'd arrested 5 of the 6 men. The only one who got away was the bald man. The one who answered the phone. The one who set the whole thing in motion. I never saw him again. I still use Craigslist now and then, but never by myself, never after dark, and never with Richard. We did get a hockey net eventually from a neighbor whose kid left for college. He gave it to us for free. But even today, every time I spot a black pickup, I catch myself glancing into the back, hoping not to see a hockey goal. I never imagined I'd accept a job through Craigslist. It wasn't that I thought I was above it. I just heard one too many unsettling stories, creepy meetups, people flaking, shady offers or worse. But life has a way of cornering you until the safer routes vanish. It all began 3 weeks after I was let go from my full-time position as a receptionist at a dental office. They were downsizing. I was living alone in a tiny studio apartment in East Philadelphia, barely surviving on savings and a few scattered gigs. My rent deadline was rapidly approaching when desperation pushed me to reach out to my friend Emily, someone who always seemed to have a side hustle or two. Emily told me she'd done some babysitting through Craigslist before. "Vet them carefully," she advised. Don't go in blind. Ask all the right questions. Trust your gut. I'd looked after kids throughout high school and college, and I was good at it. I figured the job couldn't have changed much. It was still about keeping kids alive and safe for a few hours. Most of the listings I came across were vague at best or downright suspicious, but then I stumbled on one that felt surprisingly ordinary, almost to the point of being too perfect. The listing read, "Childcare needed Saturday evening. Hi, we're looking for someone to watch our 2 boys this Saturday, ages 6 and 9, from around 5:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. Chill household. Just need someone responsible so we can enjoy our anniversary dinner. $120 for the night. Message for address details. Thanks, Catherine N." The simplicity and friendliness of the post made it feel safe. The wording was casual, and the pay was generous without raising red flags. I replied. Chloe got back to me within the hour. She sent the address and a short follow-up. "Thanks for reaching out. My husband and I will be heading out just after 5:30. Our boys are Zach and Cody, super low maintenance. Dinner's already taken care of. They'll probably just watch TV, play some games, maybe read a little before bed. Should be an easy night." We exchanged a few more messages. She seemed normal, actually friendly. Her message even ended with a smiley face. It almost made me feel foolish for being so wary. Still, I did my homework. I searched the address, 1585 Brookfield Lane. It was in a cul-de-sac on the outskirts of town near some older residential areas, but not far enough out to seem sketchy. I messaged Emily all the details just to be cautious. "Text me when you get there," she wrote back. "And if it feels off, don't stay." That Saturday was dry and warm when I arrived at 5:18 p.m. The driveway was cracked and narrow. The house was a weathered single-story with peeling blue paint and tangled shrubs along the front. A wind chime tinkled beneath the awning, and the porch light was already glowing, even though the sun hadn't yet set. Something about it all gave me a strange tightness in my chest. Not quite fear, just unease. I knocked, no response. I tried again, and this time heard faint movement inside. Eventually, the door opened to reveal a man, probably late 50s or early 60s, tall, lanky, his gray hair thinning in a long, uneven beard. He wore a faded t-shirt with unreadable lettering, and jeans stained with what looked like old paint. He squinted at me as if struggling to focus. "You the babysitter?" "Yeah," I said. "Catherine told me to be here at 5:30. Right, he muttered, rubbing the back of his head. "She just stepped out with the boys to grab snacks or something. You can come in though. She'll be back in 5. The way he watched me made my spine go rigid, but I didn't want to overreact. I stepped inside. The place smelled like dust and stale grease. The front room was cluttered with old boxes, yellowed newspapers, and a lone recliner. The air felt heavy. "Sorry about the mess," he said, shutting the door behind me. I heard the click of the lock. "We're reorganizing things." "No worries," I said, trying to sound at ease. He gestured down a tight hallway. "Living room's that way. TV, couch, you can hang out there." I walked slowly, taking everything in. No toys. No kids' artwork. No backpacks. No framed photos of children. Just dull beige walls, bland generic prints, and layers of dust. I sat on a faded brown couch. My phone buzzed. It was Emily. "You good?" I typed back. "Weird vibe, but okay so far. Catherine's not here yet. Just her husband." He passed by the hallway again, mumbling under his breath. He was pacing now. Occasionally he'd glance in my direction and say things like, "She should have been back already," or "Sorry again, just bad timing." It all felt strangely performative. By 5:45, I stood up. "I think I might take off," I said lightly. He looked surprised. Wait, she might be downstairs. Didn't hear the front door earlier, so maybe she came in through the side." He gestured toward a door I hadn't noticed before. One in the kitchen, partially hidden behind a curtain. "She goes down there with the boys sometimes for crafts, art stuff. She's probably waiting for you." The house had fallen completely silent. I walked over and opened the door. The basement was pitch dark. A damp, earthy smell hit me. Mildew, dust, and something sharp like rusted metal. I stood frozen. "Go on," he said, overly chipper. "They're probably just getting set up." I didn't move. My stomach twisted. "Actually, I just got a text," I blurted. "My ride's here early, I need to go. Sorry. Maybe we can reschedule." I turned and rushed toward the front door. Locked. He was still right behind me. "Hold on a sec," he said, his voice suddenly flat. "You haven't even met the kids." I fumbled with the deadbolt, my heart racing. Click. It opened. I didn't turn back. I ran down the porch steps, crossed the lawn and dove into my car. My hands trembled as I unlocked the door. Behind me, I heard him shouting, maybe a name or something else, but it didn't matter. I slammed the door and peeled out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, I saw him standing in the yard, fists clenched. I drove straight to a grocery store parking lot 10 minutes away, pulled in and broke down crying. Then I called Emily. She answered on the first ring. What happened? I told her everything. Call the cops, she said. Right now. The dispatcher sounded calm as I recounted the house, the man, the phony babysitting setup. She asked for the address and thanked me for speaking up. 2 hours later, a police officer phoned me for more details. I repeated everything. He said they'd look into it. That was the last I heard, at least formally. 2 weeks passed. I tried to forget, picked up a temporary job at a pet store, buried myself in normalcy. Then one evening my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A message. Hi, we saw your babysitting profile. We have 2 boys, ages 6 and 9, and need a sitter this Saturday. $120 for the night. Let us know if you're available. Catherine N. My stomach turned. Same message, same price, different number. But I'd never even made a public profile. I blocked the contact. 2 days later, another message. New number. Hey, found your ad. Looking for a sitter near Brookfield. 2 boys. Easy evening. Let us know. Tom and Catherine. The following day I changed my number. 3 months later I moved. Took Emily up on her offer to crash in Ridgewood until I could land back on my feet. I never heard from Catherine again, but I saved every single screenshot just in case. Even now when I browse job listings, I sometimes spot posts that feel too familiar. The tone, the offer, the rate, different names, different cities, and I can't help but wonder, how many people ignored their instincts? How many stepped into that basement? And how many never made it back out? Honestly, it felt too good to be legit. I'm Ashton Briggs. I used to be a sous chef at a fancy spot in Chicago until the world went off the rails. The pandemic rolled in, layoffs followed, and the owner eventually shuttered the place without fanfare. My boyfriend Nick did everything he could to keep us afloat, but he passed suddenly from a brain aneurysm. Not even a warning sign, just collapsed during a shower. After that, everything crumbled. I lost the apartment, ran through what savings I had, and ended up bouncing between shelters in my car. When I saw that job posting, I didn't think twice. The property sat on the outskirts of a tiny northern Wisconsin town, hidden far off the main road. The path to get there was a long gravel trail winding through thick pine woods. My old Hyundai coughed its way up the drive, finally stopping in front of a towering iron gate that creaked open like it had been expecting me. Past that, the house came into view, a looming colonial mansion, all white columns and shuttered windows, with a heavy, almost frozen atmosphere. On the front steps stood a tall man in a charcoal suit, maybe in his mid-40s, calm, serious. He introduced himself as Mr. Bowen, the caretaker. "You're Ashton Briggs?" he asked, offering his hand. "That's me," I said, trying to appear put together, even though I'd been living out of my car trunk for nearly a month. "Prince Julian isn't in today," he told me while guiding me inside, "but he left word to get you settled in. You'll meet him later." I had no clue what to say. Prince? He must have seen my confusion. His family has held the title for generations, he explained. European lineage. It's more tradition than anything formal now. I nodded, pretending I understood. We passed down a spotless hallway lined with antique portraits, stiff men in military garb, women dressed in voluminous gowns, all painted in that unmistakable 1800s style. At the end of the corridor, he turned through a side door, leading me along a stone path that cut through a garden to a smaller brick building tucked behind tall trees. It wasn't exactly a shack, but it felt far removed from the main house. Private? Yes. Isolated? Definitely. "This is yours," Bowen said, unlocking the door. Inside was modest, wooden floors, a narrow metal-framed twin bed, a small bathroom, a kitchenette, and a wired landline bolted to the wall. "No cell reception out here," he added, reading my face. "If the prince or I need to reach you, we'll call this phone." I gave a quiet nod. "Understood." He lingered, hand resting on the doorknob. "One thing," he said, "don't let any nighttime sounds bother you. This place carries echoes." It struck me as strange, but I just smiled and thanked him. Once he left, I dropped my duffel and sat on the bed, exhaling deeper than I had in days. I was alone, but I had shelter, a bed, a door. I could breathe again. Or so I thought. That first night wasn't hard because of the bed or the silence. It was the nagging sense that something or someone was right outside my window. Around 2 a.m. I started hearing tapping. Gentle, rhythmic. I yanked the curtain open, expecting a raccoon or some forest critter. Nothing. Just trees swaying under the moonlight. Then, at 3:11 a.m., I heard what sounded like whimpering. Not animal cries, something human. Muffled, sad. Sleep was impossible. By the time I made it to the kitchen at 7, I looked like death warmed over. "You okay?" asked an older woman who introduced herself as Meredith, the prince's mother. "Didn't sleep much," I admitted. "Probably just nerves. New place." She gave a knowing smile. "That cottage hasn't had anyone living in it for quite a while. It can be unsettling, but it gets easier." I made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, hand-cut potatoes. The prince never showed. I was told he kept strange hours. By midday, with the sun out and kitchen work steady, I started thinking maybe my mind had just played tricks on me the night before. After dinner service, I returned to my quarters, freshened up, got into bed, and then it all started again. The tapping returned, louder this time. The soft cries shifted into something deeper, agonized, almost pleading. I sat up in a cold sweat. This wasn't an echo. I got up, turned on the lights, checked every corner. Nothing. But when I pressed my ear to the floorboards, I could hear it, clear as day, beneath the floor. The next morning, I pulled Bowen aside. "Can I ask what happened to the last cook?" He seemed thrown. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious," I lied. He hesitated. "Her name was Alice. She arrived 6 months ago. Stayed in that same house. Said she liked the quiet. But after 3 weeks, she vanished." My stomach turned. Vanished, no signs of foul play. Her things were still there. We assumed she left on her own. Her husband came looking, but she was gone. We contacted the police, but there wasn't much to go on. "You just dropped it?" I asked, uneasy. He gave a grim nod. "We searched. Thoroughly. Nothing ever turned up. It was like she disappeared into thin air. That night the sounds became unbearable. Taps turned into bangs. The soft cries turned to pleading wails. I lost it. I yanked up the rug, desperate, scanning for any loose floorboards. Near the bed I found 3, slightly misaligned. My fingers shook as I pried one up. Beneath it I saw cloth white, stained. I pulled it back, and the smell hit first. Then the sight, her face, mummified, frozen in terror. I screamed until my voice broke. The police showed up after Bowen called. They exhumed the body. It was Alice. The autopsy showed she'd been strangled. Turns out her husband, the same man who came looking for her, had stayed a single night, just long enough to kill her, hide her body, and stage the cottage. He used a mannequin dressed in her clothes to fool the estate's cameras and walked out like nothing happened. He was arrested in Milwaukee, confessed everything, said she was planning to leave him. I quit that day, packed up and drove straight back to Chicago. I parked outside the restaurant I once worked at and cried for an hour. That old life, difficult as it had been, suddenly felt like a haven. Some doors, especially the ones wide open when you're desperate, aren't worth walking through. It began with what looked like an average post. I had just decided to put my 2006 Honda CR-V up for sale. It wasn't some flashy vehicle, but it was dependable, had a clean title, no serious mechanical problems, and still had decent life left despite the 200,000 miles on it. The paint was a little dull on the hood, and the air conditioning sometimes made an odd rattling sound when it kicked in, but nothing major. I had kept up with all the maintenance over the years, oil changes, tire rotations, brake pads, everything on schedule. A few weeks earlier I had bought a newer car and didn't want the old one taking up space, so I decided to list it on Craigslist. That's where I had originally bought it years back, and my experiences had been mostly positive. People always claim it's shady, but if you're careful, it's fine, or so I thought. I snapped about 10 photos inside, outside, the odometer, even under the hood. Then I wrote a simple but straightforward ad. I priced it at $2,800, fair and not suspiciously low. I posted it Thursday afternoon and got nothing the rest of the day. But by the next morning around 10:30, I received a text from an unknown number. "Hey, saw your ad for the CR-V. My name's Tony. Been looking for one. Still available?" I replied, "Yep, still got it. Want to come check it out?" He responded almost immediately, "Yeah, I can come by tomorrow night after work around 8:30 or 9. That okay?" I hesitated a little. It wasn't unusual for buyers to come late, especially if they worked odd shifts, but something about a stranger showing up that late made me pause. Still, I lived in a good-sized apartment complex on the edge of West Grove, a quiet suburb. The car was parked out in the lot already, and he wouldn't need to come near my door. So I agreed. "That's fine, just meet me in the parking lot by the car," he replied. "Cool, see you then." Nothing about it seemed off. The next day I cleaned up the car, vacuumed, wiped everything down, cleared out the glove box and console. Around 8:15 I threw on a hoodie and went downstairs to wait. It was dark, but not so late that it felt unsettling. People were still walking their dogs, neighbors coming home from work. I stood by the CRV scrolling on my phone, glancing up whenever a car pulled in. At exactly 8:58, a black Dodge Charger with tinted windows rolled in slowly. It passed me, parked in a visitor spot a few spaces away. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a tall man, mid-30s or older, bald, muscular, tattoos running down his forearms. He wore a black Carhartt jacket and dark jeans. He carried this kind of tense energy, like he was prepared for a fight even while saying nothing. But he smiled as he walked over. "You selling the CRV?" he asked, voice deeper than I expected. "Yeah," I answered politely, forcing a smile. "You must be Tony." "Yep." He circled the car, checking the body. "Looks good. Been driving it much?" "Mostly to work. It's been solid for years. No leaks, no overheating. Timing belt done at 180,000. Got paperwork if you want." He nodded, shined a small flashlight on the tires. "Mind if I check under the hood?" "Sure," I said, popping it open. We went through the usual motions. He asked a few standard questions. He didn't seem like a real car guy, but enough to pass as one. "Can I take it for a spin?" he asked. "I'll need to come with you," I said right away, trying to laugh it off as a rule. He grinned, but without warmth. "No problem." We got in. I directed him around the block and onto the main road. He tested the acceleration, silent most of the time, jaw tight. The drive only lasted 10 minutes but felt longer. Finally, he said, "I like it. Feels solid." When we got back, he parked in the same spot. I stepped out, hopeful. "So what do you think?" He looked at me, paused. "Yeah, I'll think about it," he said flatly. I blinked. "Oh, okay, sure." Then casually he added, "Hey, mind if I use your bathroom real quick before I go?" Time froze. It was like a record scratch in a movie. Every instinct in me tightened. Yeah, I'd rather not," I said carefully. "Nothing personal. I just don't let strangers inside." He didn't answer right away, just stared at me, smile gone. The silence dragged. Then he gave a slow nod. "All right, no worries." I gave a quick wave, turned away. Instead of heading toward the side entrance like usual, I circled to the front doors just to be safe. When I got there, I glanced back. No one was following. Relieved, I went inside. The entry was quiet. I pressed the elevator button, stepped in, hit 3, and leaned against the wall. Less than 30 seconds later, the doors opened on my floor. I walked out, turned left toward my apartment, and froze. At the far end of the hallway, the stairwell door opened. Tony stepped through. At first I thought, no, it can't be him. But it was. Same jacket, same walk, same stare. My blood turned cold. I didn't speak. I just turned and walked fast the other way. I tried not to run, but then came the sound, footsteps, heavy, closing in. I ran, sprinting down the hall. I shoved open the stairwell door and bolted down, heart pounding. His steps echoed right behind me. Down 2 flights, into the garage, the sound bouncing off the concrete walls. My breath burned. I didn't go for my car. I wasn't sure I had time. Instead, I dashed into another stairwell, slammed the door, and bounded up to the ground floor. I burst through a side exit into the cold night air, sprinted across the lot to my CRV. With shaking hands, I unlocked it, jumped inside, locked the doors, and started the engine. I peeled out, called 911, and the dispatcher stayed with me as I circled nearby blocks. I told them everything. Tony, his car, what happened. 5 minutes later, I saw flashing lights back at my complex. I returned slowly, parked on the street. Tony's Charger was still there. Police found him at a ground floor apartment trying to force open a patio door. He had no tools, no money, no sign he was buying a car. That night it hit me how close I had been to real danger. The car ad was never his interest. It was just bait. What he wanted was an address, a face, and the right moment. I deleted the Craigslist post immediately and never used the site again. Now if I ever sell something, I only meet buyers at the police station parking lot. No exceptions. When I was 18, I was still living at my parents' house, and it was summertime. I had just wrapped up my first year of college, broke and searching for a seasonal job, but I wasn't having much luck. Since my parents were divorced, I spent most of the time with my mom, though I stayed at my dad's place occasionally. I remember wanting cash badly, so I hopped on Craigslist to check out whether there were any short-term gigs I could do. The site had a job section with listings for both permanent and temporary work. Most of the temporary stuff was simple things: yard cleanup, hauling boxes, moving furniture, projects like that. One ad immediately grabbed my attention because it sounded almost too easy. The listing simply read, "Watch my house while I'm gone." I clicked for more details, though honestly my gut told me right away that it felt kind of odd. The ad had a couple of pictures showing the inside of the place, but not much else. What it did mention, however, was the pay. I don't recall the exact amount, but it was decent, around $400 to stay for 2 nights. It looked like effortless money, so I answered quickly. All I had to do was stay in someone else's house for a weekend and collect the cash. The pictures showed nothing special, an ordinary-looking home, not fancy at all. I texted the owner, told him I was interested, and after about 10 minutes of back and forth, he gave me the job. A few days later, I headed over to the address. I didn't tell either of my parents. At the time, I was at my dad's place and told him I'd be crashing at a friend's for a couple of nights. My mom was far stricter and would have grilled me with questions, but my dad just said, "Cool, have fun." I knew neither of them would have agreed if I'd been upfront, but I convinced myself it was harmless and worth it for the money. The house was only about 15 minutes away, and when I got there, it looked as plain as it had in the photos, if anything, a little below average. The neighborhood was quiet, with modest houses close by. I knocked, and a man named Jerry opened the door. He looked to be around 50, and explained he was leaving town for a couple of days. His only instructions were simple: stay there, keep an eye on the place, and sleep in the guest room. He didn't have any pets or plants, so I wasn't sure why he needed someone at all. Maybe he just wanted peace of mind and had the money to spare. He handed me a set of keys and left. The house itself was modest. A single story with a basement I didn't bother to check out. Inside there was a living room, dining space, kitchen, bathroom, and 2 bedrooms. The furniture was sparse but comfortable enough. I settled on the couch in the living room, watching TV and scrolling on my phone. The kitchen was almost empty of food, so I eventually stepped out to buy some groceries, then came back and resumed lounging. As night fell, the silence was striking. Both my parents' houses were always noisy with pets or siblings, so the quiet felt unnatural. Around 11 that night, as I was about to drift off on the couch, I suddenly heard something below, footsteps coming from the basement. My whole body went tense. The sound froze me, and I was too terrified to investigate. I stood there listening, but the noise stopped. I tried distracting myself with the TV, though my mind stayed on edge. About 10 minutes later, the footsteps came again, this time clearly moving up the stairs. The creaking of the steps left no doubt. I panicked, ran to the guest room, and shut the door. I pressed my ear to listen, but the sounds vanished. By that point, I was so shaken that I texted Jerry, not caring if it disturbed him in the middle of the night. I was ready to leave, but surprisingly, he answered quickly. I told him I'd heard movement in the basement and was freaked out. He replied saying it was just his roommate, Carl. That confused me completely. He hadn't mentioned anyone else living there. And if he did have a roommate, why did he need me to house sit? I tried rationalizing maybe he didn't trust Carl not to steal things. It was the only way to make sense of it. After working up some nerve, I left the bedroom to look around. The house was empty. I stayed away from the basement, assuming Carl was down there, and after no more noises, I figured he must have gone to bed. Feeling slightly calmer, I returned to the guest room and managed to fall asleep. Sometime later in the night, I suddenly woke up, wide awake in total darkness. Nothing seemed out of place, but then I looked toward the doorway. Standing there, just outside the guest room, was Jerry, the owner himself, watching me. The second I locked eyes on him, he stepped away quickly. But I knew what I saw. Horrified, I ran to the door, slammed it shut, and flipped on the lights. Somewhere in the distance, I heard a door shut, though I couldn't tell which one. After a few minutes of silence, I decided I wasn't staying another second. I grabbed my things, bolted out of the room, and left the house as fast as I could. I didn't see anyone else on the way out. By the time I reached my dad's house, it was close to 4 in the morning. When he asked, I just said I'd come back early from my friends. No way was I telling him the truth. He'd lose it. I was just relieved to be safe. I never got another message from Jerry after that. The Craigslist listing disappeared, and I realized he probably never left town at all. I don't believe there was ever a roommate either. Looking back, I think Jerry was the one I'd heard moving around in the basement, and he invented Carl to cover it up. That experience rattled me so much that I stopped browsing Craigslist entirely. Since then, I've stuck to proper jobs and avoided strange ads like that forever. A couple of years back, I was searching for a replacement vehicle. I decided to check Craigslist since I'd always felt like that was where the best bargains were hiding. It usually took a bit of digging, sometimes even weeks, but eventually you could stumble on a solid deal. I eventually found one car that seemed like it could work for me. The price looked fair, and everything in the description appeared legitimate. It wasn't some unbelievably good steal, but it looked like a normal, trustworthy listing. I sent a message to the seller saying I was interested, and within a few days we arranged to meet. We met up in the parking lot of a nearby store, and after giving the car a quick look, I asked to test drive it just to be sure it ran properly. The seller was a man. His name started with a J, maybe Jeff or Jordan. He was tall, kind of lanky, wore glasses, and had very dark hair. He offered to take me for a test drive, but oddly wouldn't let me drive it myself. I walked over to the driver's side, but he stopped me and insisted I get in on the passenger's side. I agreed and climbed in, assuming he just wanted to demonstrate how well it ran. For reasons I didn't understand, though, he wouldn't let me behind the wheel. We left the lot and started down the road. At first I thought maybe he was just particular about his things, but as we drove he kept heading farther and farther away. At first I didn't notice because I was focusing on how the car sounded, but soon it was clear we weren't circling back. He wasn't just making casual turns near the store. He was driving straight down one lonely road with purpose. We'd been going for at least 10 minutes, and he hadn't shown any sign of turning back. When I finally said we could return now, he brushed me off saying he just wanted to prove the car ran smoothly. I told him I already believed it was fine, and asked again to head back. He muttered just a second, and kept driving. The silence in the car stretched on, and after a while, I repeated myself more firmly, telling him to turn around. Again, he only said to wait a minute. Nothing changed. The longer it went on, the sketchier it felt. I told him outright I wanted to go back immediately, but he ignored me completely. At that point, I realized I had little control. I couldn't just jump out since he was driving too fast, and I knew I wasn't physically able to fight him. I'm a woman barely 5'2", and he was easily 6 feet tall with a much stronger build. Eventually, he turned down another deserted road and kept going. I pulled out my phone only to see I had no service. Thanks to T-Mobile, I couldn't call anyone. After another 5 minutes, I spotted something ahead. It was a police cruiser parked along the shoulder. I wasn't sure if the officer was clocking speeders or just idling, but there were no other cars or people in sight. As we approached, I knew we'd drive right past him. I quickly tried rolling down my window, but halfway down it froze. That's when I realized the driver had locked my window controls. Then, before I could react, he raised it all the way back up. We were only seconds from passing the cop, so I started waving frantically, hoping to be noticed. The man shouted at me to stop, swearing at me, and even tried grabbing my arm, making the car swerve slightly. Just as we passed, I glanced in the mirror and saw the patrol car pull out, blue lights flashing. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. The man driving scowled and demanded to know what was wrong with me and why I'd done that. I told him all I wanted was to get out of the car. He insisted he hadn't done anything wrong, even as we pulled over. But at that point, the test drive had stretched to nearly half an hour, 20 minutes longer than I'd asked him to turn back. When the officer approached, he asked what was happening, why I had been waving so desperately, and if I was safe. The man jumped in to explain first, claiming we were just test driving and that I was acting irrationally. I told the officer I simply wanted out of the car, but the man immediately cut me off and told him no. It struck me how suddenly he had so much to say, when earlier he'd either ignored me entirely or answered in clipped, vague ways whenever I asked to turn around. The officer made it clear he wasn't allowed to keep me in the car against my will, and only then did the man finally let me out. I explained everything to the officer, who then checked the man's ID while another patrol unit arrived. Unfortunately, they ended up letting him go. Still, the police gave me a ride back to my own car and made sure he didn't follow. I drove straight home afterward and reported him to Craigslist, though I never saw him listed again. Since that day, I haven't once returned to Craigslist to look for cars. I honestly wasn't even searching for a vehicle at first. My son Jake had been constantly pressing me about getting his license and wanted something dependable to drive himself to school and his part-time shifts. At first I brushed him off, but after weeks of him showing me car listings, grade reports, and almost pleading with me to take him to the DMV, I finally gave in. He was about to turn 18 in just a few weeks, and I thought it would make the perfect surprise. He had no clue I was making any arrangements. I didn't have a large budget to work with, though. After hours of searching across all the common platforms, Auto Trader, Facebook Marketplace, Cars.com, I was getting irritated. Anything decent was either outrageously priced or sold within hours. The one site I hadn't touched was Craigslist, which I'd avoided because of all the horror stories. But in desperation, I gave it a shot. To my surprise, I came across a posting that seemed almost unbelievable. A 2004 Honda Accord, silver, clean upholstery, 68,000 miles, no accidents, and priced at just $3,500. The pictures seemed authentic. None of that overly touched-up dealership polish. It was sitting in a gravel driveway with trees around it, slightly dusty, like a car that actually belonged to someone. The seller's name was Rick. He lived in a small town called Red Hill, barely 20 minutes away. I phoned him that night. He sounded older, maybe late 50s, polite and calm, and explained he was selling because his daughter had moved out of state and left the car behind. Runs like a dream, he assured me, adding he had just replaced the brakes and battery, no hidden issues. We arranged to meet the following afternoon. I told Jake I had errands to handle and slipped the cash into my jacket. The Thursday sky was overcast, threatening rain, and I recall how still the drive felt as soon as I left the highway and followed the narrow, tree-lined lanes toward Red Hill. The address led me to a long gravel path winding uphill through heavy brush and weathered oaks. At the top stood a small one-story home, paint peeling, porch sagging. Oddly, there was no Honda anywhere, only a faded green pickup with mismatched wheels parked under a carport. But the house number matched the ad. I pulled over to the side, got out, and walked up. The gravel crunched under my boots. The silence struck me first. No birdsong, no breeze, only the faint tick of my car cooling behind me. The front door had a lion's head knocker but no bell. I knocked once, then again. No response. I waited. 5 minutes passed. I knocked louder. Still nothing. I dialed Rick's number, and that's when I heard a faint, tinny ringtone inside the house. That's when my nerves began to rise. I stepped to the window near the porch, cupped my hands to the glass, and peered inside. It was dim, curtains drawn halfway. I could make out piles of newspapers, old furniture hidden under sheets, and what appeared to be a stuffed toy in an armchair, except it wasn't a toy. At first I thought mannequin, but it was slouched in a hoodie, pale skin, and lifeless, glassy eyes that weren't plastic. I staggered back, heart thudding, trying to reason with myself. Maybe it was a bizarre sculpture or some kind of doll, but my instincts screamed otherwise. I circled to the side of the house and spotted a half-open garage door. Inside were neat rows of auto parts, doors, seats, bumpers, stacked and labeled with eerie precision. Too orderly for junk, too pristine for salvage, and no Accord anywhere. Just as I turned to retreat, my eyes caught another figure through the back window. This one stood upright, back turned, motionless, facing the yard as if placed deliberately. I tapped the glass lightly, dread climbing in my stomach. Nothing moved. The rear door creaked open with the wind, exposing a shadowed corridor within. That ringtone chimed again, muffled, echoing deeper inside. Then silence. I stepped back, and suddenly the blinds on the window snapped shut fast. Someone had been standing there, watching. Panic surged. I bolted. The cash meant nothing now. I sprinted for my car, slammed the locks, and tore out, gravel spraying. I didn't slow until the main road. That night I checked the Craigslist posting again. Gone. Rick's number disconnected. I filed a report with the police, but without a plate, without a real name, there wasn't much they could do. They later told me the place had been abandoned for years. Whoever I'd spoken to had used a burner. Jake never learned what happened. I bought him a certified used Civic from a dealership instead. He was thrilled, but I still replay it sometimes. Driving alone at night, the pale figure in the chair, the unnatural stillness, the immaculate car parts, the phone echoing from a dead house, and I wonder how many others had responded to Rick's ad. I hadn't stopped until I'd hit the main road. My chest was tight, hands trembling at the wheel, glancing in the rear view, half expecting that rusted pickup to barrel after me. It never did. Once home, I locked every door and just sat in my car staring at my phone. I reopened Craigslist. Nothing. The ad scrubbed clean. No Rick. No Accord. Nothing at all. I tried the number again. Disconnected. Sleep didn't come that night. My mind kept circling back to that figure by the window, standing stiff and unnatural. The more I thought about it, the less I believed it was taxidermy or a doll. It hadn't moved, yes, but it was too exact, too perfectly staged, as though someone wanted it mistaken for something lifeless. The next morning, I filed another report. I told the officer plainly. I'd answered a Craigslist ad for a car, gone to the house, and found something horribly wrong. I left out the part about thinking the figure was mounted like a trophy. They'd never take that seriously. To my shock, the officer didn't dismiss me. "You said the ad disappeared?" he asked, typing deliberately. "Yes," I answered, right after I left. He gave me a pause. "You'd be surprised how often we hear stories like this. Craigslist setups, fake deals, sometimes worse." "Worse?" I asked. He didn't answer. A week later, a detective left me a voicemail. They had gone to the property. Confirmed, abandoned. Nobody had lived there for at least a year. Neighbors had never heard of a Rick. No cars linked to the address. The pickup was gone by the time authorities arrived. But they found something else in the basement. Behind a hidden wall, photographs. Dozens of them, taken with an old film camera. People captured mid-action, talking in cars, smiling at the entryway, a few with anxious looks. One photo even showed a man circling the rear of the house, just as I had. They told me one of the pictures was of me. Whoever had stayed there was never caught. Police believed he drifted between foreclosed homes, relying on disposable numbers and burner ads to bait strangers. Perhaps not even to kill. Maybe just to frighten, control, or something worse. Nobody knows what happened to the rest of the faces in those photos. I erased Craigslist from my phone that night and never searched for a used car again. Sometimes I catch myself thinking, what if I had knocked again, or stepped into that backyard, or lingered even a few minutes longer? But I didn't. And maybe that's the only reason I'm alive to tell it. I used to work overnight at a small roadside motel off the highway. It wasn't exactly glamorous, more like stale coffee, buzzing lobby lights and the occasional intoxicated guest yelling over a late fee, but it covered my bills and even let me save a bit. The only good part about those hours was the stillness that came after midnight. Aside from the occasional check-in, I was left alone behind the counter most of the night. I'd pass the time browsing Craigslist, not really looking for anything, just scanning the free section or electronics listings. People posted the strangest things: busted treadmills, full dining room sets, piles of baby clothes, even working TVs from folks leaving town in a rush. Around that time, my old TV had just died. It was a battered Toshiba that had been passed down through several hands before finally giving out. Watching shows on my laptop was starting to get irritating. I wasn't hunting for anything fancy, just something reliable. One night, around 2 in the morning, with half a gas station sandwich in hand and lukewarm coffee in front of me, I spotted a listing. A 50-inch LG flat screen, lightly used. The photos didn't look like generic stock shots. It was clearly sitting on a cheap stand in a cluttered living room with moving boxes stacked around it. The whole thing looked authentic, like someone genuinely clearing out their place. The price was $120. Not so low it seemed like a scam, but just cheap enough for someone wanting it gone fast. The ad was fresh, less than half an hour old, so I sent a message. "Hi, I'm interested in the TV. Still available?" Then I went back to half watching the security feed and checking in a trucker who smelled of diesel and exhaustion. About an hour later, I got a reply. "Hey, this is Kara from Craigslist. Yes, still available. You can come tomorrow after 6 if that works." Her name hadn't been listed, but that wasn't out of the ordinary. I texted back, 7 works for me. What's the address? She responded with an address on Willow Terrace Drive. It was a quiet neighborhood only 10 minutes from my place, lined with older single-story homes and broad lawns. I checked it on maps, it seemed safe. I texted back, "Cool, see you then." The next day, after clocking out, I swung by an ATM and pulled out $140 just in case. When I reached the neighborhood, it was still light outside. Birds chirped, kids zipped by on bikes, and someone across the street was mowing their lawn. The house Kara gave me was beige, with an uneven porch and grass that needed cutting. It didn't look dangerous, just a little worn, like an older relative's house. I parked along the curb, stuffed the cash in my jacket, and walked up. Before I could knock, the door swung open. A woman stood there, average build, dark hair tied up in a messy bun, sweatshirt with a faded college logo, leggings. She looked early 30s. "Hey, you must be Alex," she said. "That's me." I nodded. "Here for the TV." "I'm Kara. Come in. Sorry about the mess. We're in the middle of moving." The inside looked just as tired as the outside. Dim, sparse, boxes piled against the wall, half-packed furniture. Only a small lamp glowed in the corner. "No worries," I said, trying to keep casual. "Looks about how my place looked before I moved." She laughed, but the sound was strained, like it was forced. "It's in the back, down the hall," she said, waving me forward. Something about the silence made my skin crawl. No hum of a fridge, no TV, no fan, just silence. Still, I followed. The hallway was narrow. Faint footprints pressed into the carpet. She stopped at the final door on the right. "Right in here," she said, opening it wide. I stepped inside and froze. The room was bare. No TV, no bed, no boxes, nothing but drawn blinds and dust. Before I could move, the door slammed behind me, lock snapping shut. I whipped around, twisting the knob, but it wouldn't budge. "Kara?" I called out, heart thudding. Nothing. "What the hell is this?" "Open the door." I pounded on it, but there was only silence. I checked my phone. No signal, not a single bar. My breath came sharp and uneven, the kind you take when your body knows you're in danger. Pressing my ear to the door, I caught voices, muffled, but definitely two. Kara and a man. My stomach dropped. "Let me out, I'm calling the cops," I shouted, but no one answered. I ran to the window, yanking the latch, but it was brittle and locked tight. Panic started bubbling in my chest. I paced the small space, searching for something to use, but the room was empty. I returned to the door, pounding harder, shouting louder. Nothing. Then an idea hit. I opened my phone, set the alarm to its loudest siren, and cranked the volume. I tossed it into the far corner and pressed myself against the wall beside the door. Footsteps thundered toward me. The lock clicked, the door opened, and a man stepped in. Tall, broad black hoodie, worn jeans. His eyes went straight to the phone, reaching to silence it. That was my chance. I lunged, slamming my weight into him. His shoulder clipped mine, but I slipped past before he could grab me. The hallway blurred around me. Kara appeared from the living room, eyes wide, reaching out. I ducked, nearly tripping over a box, and didn't stop. Out the door, across the porch, my keys already in hand. I hit unlock mid-run, yanked the car door open, and threw myself inside. Slammed it shut, locked it, jammed the key into the ignition. They were on the porch by then. But I didn't look back. Tires screeched as I tore away, not stopping until I reached a gas station 3 blocks down. I bolted inside, breathless, and told the cashier, "Call the cops, someone tried to trap me." The police came, took my statement. I handed over Kara's number, the address, the Craigslist ad. They drove me back, but the house was dark, curtains drawn, lights off, no one inside. A neighbor stepped out and told them the house wasn't even supposed to be occupied. The owner was out of town on business and had been gone all week. The Craigslist ad, already deleted. Kara's number, disconnected. My phone, still inside that house, gone for good. The officer said it wasn't the first setup they'd seen. Sometimes it was just a robbery. Sometimes it was worse. They never caught Kara or the man. A week later, I bought a used TV from a pawn shop instead. And that was the last time I ever touched Craigslist.